Welcome back to another episode, and today is a book review day. We're going to talk about Blue Ocean Strategy by W. Chan Kim and Renée Mauborgne. If you're watching this video, you're probably familiar with this book. This is an international bestseller across 5 continents. And since its publication in 2004, the book has been translated into 43 languages and has sold over 3.5 million copies. It's received numerous accolades and has been on the bestseller list by the Wall Street Journal, Business Week, Amazon, and it's been selected as one of the best business books of 2005. In fact, since that time, it's been on multiple top 100 and top 50 business books lists. Some people have gone as far to call this the Oscars of management thinking. Yes, that's right. That is a huge title, but that is the type of book that this is. And along those same lines, it's often in the same class as many of the Tony Robbins books, Jim Collins' Good to Great, and so on and so forth, just for context. The core concept here of Blue Ocean Strategy, it introduces a concept of, air quotes, blue oceans, which are untapped market spaces ripe for innovation, contrasted with red oceans. So think about that for a moment. A blue ocean is a massive opportunity. So let's take the automobile market, for example. So you have General Motors, you have Ford, and a plethora of other organizations. One might think at some day in time that this is no longer a blue ocean. This has become a red ocean infested with nothing but sharks and other predators. Well, someday somebody came along and invented the electric vehicle, the EV. And that became a blue ocean adjacent to a red ocean, an area that was completely untapped until competitors start coming along. So when you get into the crux of the book, the authors argue that instead of battling rivals in crowded markets, businesses should seek these true blue oceans. And to do so really will help you achieve lasting success. It's a compelling concept that argues and encourages companies to think outside the box and redefine what their market boundaries are. At times, there are some concepts in here that really reminded me of the book Think Again by Adam Grant. Now, after reading the book and taking some time to reflect on it and actually doing some research on this book, I can give you a long list of things that worked for me here, but also a longer list of things that maybe didn't work. So first, let's talk about what I liked about the book. Number one, I genuinely appreciate the emphasis on innovation and to push and explore uncharted territories. I would say that the book provides some analytical tools, some really unique frameworks to help businesses identify and develop these opportunities. So, for instance, this book talks about a strategy canvas, not something you're probably a stranger to if you've read other business or strategy books. However, I think that there are some really valuable tools here throughout the book that you'll learn that'll help you visualize a company's current position in the market and then identify some areas for differentiation. So if you're reading between the lines here, yes, there is some marketing context here. There is some leadership context and then some innovation context as well, which is kind of fun for me. I like that these insights can be instrumental for businesses who want to break free from the competition. But also, when we're talking about differentiating, it is really important to talk about that marketing piece for a minute. If you are looking for differentiation and or innovation, a lot of times, if your business truly is different, if you believe your business is head and shoulders better than the rest, and when I say better, generally you're better because you're different. And if you're not different, ultimately, what are you? Think about that for a second. You're just a commodity. So when we're talking about differentiation in the market, I would argue that maybe this isn't the best book for you. Maybe you need to read Think Again, maybe the one-page business plan, maybe my marketing book called Marketing So Easy It's Fun Again. But whatever the case, differentiation is important here because that is no different than positioning. And most companies do not have a positioning statement. They do not have a problem-solving statement. They do not clearly communicate how they are different, why they are different, and or the problem they solve. Ultimately, whatever industry you're in, whether it be marketing, sales, you run a spa, you run a restaurant, you're a chiropractor, There are millions of chiropractors. There are millions of bankers, millions of financial advisors. They ultimately do almost all about the same thing, but one or two of them can stand out, rise above the noise because of how they choose to position themselves. It could be something you specialize in. It could be something you're doing that no one else is doing for the time being. And that is positioning. And this book does push on that. But again, if you are different already, it's up to you to position yourself. Not every business can find a blue ocean for their industry. Could you find some ways to create additional revenue streams? Absolutely. Could you find some different ways to add additional revenue, to do more marketing? Absolutely. But a lot of that's going to come back to advertising, positioning, marketing strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So overall, there are a lot of nice takeaways in this book. But one thing I want to mention is that this is a pretty long book. It is written at what I would call an academia level. It is not written for the average Joe who's looking for some takeaways, some self-help, things that they can integrate into their business today, tomorrow, or next month. Now, let's get to where this book fell short. Now, one of the things I want to mention is that after I read the book, I noticed this: Harvard Business Review Press. Now, nothing wrong with that. Typically, when you're associated with Harvard, typically you're going to get a very high quality, very highly vetted, probably even highly reviewed book. And I know the contents of this book it's impeccable. You can't argue with the quality of the writing, the quality of the stories in the book, the facts in the book. However, for me personally, reading this book, it just felt like a bit of a word salad. It felt a bit long. And I say a bit long, I don't mean like 20% long. I mean, like, I felt like the context of this book could have been written in 2 or 3 chapters, to the point to where some of those summary books you can buy on Amazon or over there on Audible, and you can read the summary of the book in about 90 minutes or less. I felt like I would be better served just doing that. So despite the many strengths of this book, I just found it challenging to get through. The writing just feels dense to me, not enjoyable. The terminology is very complex, sometimes seems very unnecessary and very long. Many of the concepts were, I felt, repeated at times, making the sections of the book a little bit redundant. I can't help but think the core message could have been better conveyed with simplistic writing. Now, again, that's not something you're going to see by the Harvard Business Review. That's not something you're going to see super often with New York Times best-selling books. But interestingly enough, I'm not alone in this sentiment. Some readers have pointed out that while the concepts and the core facts of the book are intriguing, the execution leaves much to be desired. For example, there were multiple reviews on Amazon and Goodreads that mentioned many concepts and tactics in this book that were also utilized in many other business books as well. So, although this book was considered the best business book of 2005 by many lists, including Fast Company and Amazon, many readers have found value in the strategies, no doubt. However, it has faced a lot of criticism for its dense writing style and repetitive content. Some argue that while the idea of creating new market spaces is appealing, it doesn't fully address the challenges of implementing such strategies in the real world. And I would argue that to be true. As I mentioned earlier, not every business can create a blue ocean strategy. Now, this goes back to my concept on differentiating yourself and positioning yourself to be in a category of your own. But again, that is up to you. That is up to your marketing. And that requires you to think differently about your business. That requires you to maybe rethink, reframe, maybe even rebrand your business. A lot of stuff that is not in this book. And if I were thinking differently about this book, I would think just as much as making this about marketing and reinvention and rebranding as I would about this being a leadership and innovation book. So before I wrap up my final thoughts on this book, I want to read one area that really stood out that I enjoyed the most. And normally when I'm reading books, especially of this size, I have anywhere from 15 to 25 post-it notes, if not more. Now, in Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell, I think I had close to 40, but again, that remains one of my favorite books of 2024/2025. So the author says here, a closer look reveals that most plans don't contain a strategy at all, but rather a smorgasbord of tactics that individually make sense, but collectively don't add up to a unified, clear direction. That sets a company apart, let alone makes the competition irrelevant. Does this sound like the strategic plans in your company? And I would argue yes. And here's the problem with strategy. In my opinion, when I'm working with clients and businesses over the years, including my own, where I fell short and where I've seen others fall short, is that you can have the most impressive strategy in the world. I don't care if it's 50 pages. I don't care if it's 2 pages. At the end of the day, if there is no implementation plan or phases, it is all going to fall very flat. Also, if that strategy doesn't have any kind of an audit, it is all hollow. It is all meaningless, and it's 100% a waste of your time, money, and effort. What do I mean by the audit part? Well, you have to go through and do the investigative research. You have to look at historical data, trends, market, competitors, budget, all these things. And it does require a big investment of your time, energy, and effort. And once you have that intel, once you have that information, all of that then cascades into your strategy. It is only then can you make what I believe are intelligent yet robust predictions / goals that are actually attainable, that are smart, that are realistic, that are going to help you get there. Because if you don't do that, all of your goals will be 100% completely arbitrary, falsified, made up. You get the point. And so that is another part of this book that I just thought felt flat. And so that statement really resonated with me, and I hope it resonates with you too. Another adjacent concept lower on the page, the author goes into the second principle of the blue ocean strategy, and that was focusing on the big picture and not the numbers. And I want to go into that for just a moment because I think it's important. I've fallen guilty of this many, many times, but so many of us get into the minutia, which is looking at the finite details and the finite numbers every single day. In social media, it's looking at the engagement, it's looking at the website traffic and all those things. But ultimately, we have to focus on the big picture. You can look at the data every single day, but you can also be paralyzed by the data. And so it's really important to focus on the big picture, to write these things down, to ensure that you remember every single day what it is you and your team is after, because that's what's more important. The day-to-day data, it's going to go up and down. You're going to see some trends, you're going to see some spikes, good, bad, or indifferent. But as long as you're pushing forward, that's when you're going to see results. And that to me was one of only a few big takeaways I had from this book. So in conclusion, Blue Ocean Strategy, it offers thought-provoking perspective on business strategy. We'll encourage you to seek innovation rather than compete in saturated markets. That cannot be understated, the importance there. The core concept, I would say, is valuable. It can inspire you, and it probably will. And hopefully it inspires you more than it inspired me. Obviously, the delivery did not resonate with me. It doesn't resonate with all readers as well. But if you're interested in strategic business concepts with dense academic writing, this is probably the book for you. If you prefer more straightforward concept, I would argue you probably shouldn't read the book. If you like the idea of the Blue Ocean Strategy, I would encourage you to read it. If you're going to read a lot of books like me, 20, 30, 40 books a year, it is worth taking a stab at it. And I would argue that I may go back and listen to the audio version in the future. And probably worth it because I'm sure I missed out on some things because I got bored at times. Overall, I'm going to rate the book 4.5 on a scale of 10. It is by far the lowest rating I've given a book, especially a highly rated book like this. But you know what? That's okay. I also bought the other book, which is the second version. It's called Blue Ocean Shift. That comes in right after this. But I'm going to say I'm not going to read that because I really didn't care for the first book. I just don't think it makes sense for me to read this one. If you've read the book, let me know. Let me know what I did wrong here with my reading and my review. If you liked it, chime in. If you didn't like it, chime in. But thanks again for listening to another episode. Catch you on the flip side.